Penka.
That's me, so wait.
First off, we have Gary Schyman, who has taken us through hell and high water with Dante's Inferno and Bioshock. Richard Jacques is #1 with the bullet, with James Bond, score for Bloodstone, and the Headhunter series. Jesper Kidd knows how to go medieval when it comes to the kills of Assassin's Creed or hand-to-hand with Hitman. Don't mess with him. Penka Kouneva, mea culpa, is my wife, and she went even further back into history to work with Steve Jablonski on the swordplay of Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time. Yeah. And if you want to go on a quest, you just call Inon because he is the king of fantasy games with Dragon Age, and just had an amazing concert at E3 where he played music from the forthcoming Lord of the Rings game, War in the North. Really cool stuff. Indiana Jones has nothing when it comes on to Greg Edmonson, whose epic adventure music has traveled all over the world with a guy you'd like to call Nathan Drake for 3 Uncharted games. I think the 3 games, it was like the 3 translated into the 3-hour wait to get to play the demo from Uncharted 3, so it's like I have to wait for that to come out, and you can definitely be sure I'm going to get that. And when it comes to video game badasses, Mike Reagan has played with some of the biggest. Conan, Kratos from the God of War series. And finally, over here is Sean Murray, who is a true musical man of action with the Call of Duty Black Ops and World at War. Well, it's great having you all here, and I'm going to ask some questions, and we're going to turn it over to you guys, and then we have the signing afterwards. So I guess we'll start way down over there and go one-on-one. Now, in terms of putting music to picture, what do you think makes video games so unique as an art form? And when do you think people really started taking it seriously? Was there a breakout score that you think did it? Gary?
I don't know. I don't know if there's any particular score that, I'm sure that some game music historian will tell us that, but I don't know of any particular score. I think certainly when the potential to have orchestral music, or really stereophiles play with games, because at a certain point technology made it possible for us to record any type of music and take a stereophile and play it back in a game score. Part of that, you basically had MIDI basically triggering little synth engines, which really, though there were some very cool scores, especially some iconic scores from the Japanese games, they certainly did not permit the composer to access the full breadth of orchestral and synth and all the different possibilities that were available to movie scores or television scores. So that certainly, I think, occurred in the late 90s and early 2000s when that became possible. And then you started to get really cinematic games that permitted and really wanted these really interesting scores. And I've been really sort of lucky to get some of those type of projects like Bioshock and Dante's Inferno, where they really were interested in a cinematic, a truly, really interesting music was what they were looking for, and they didn't want anything cliche. They really wanted something original. So I think this has been happening for about a decade now, and I think it's only going to continue. I don't like to compare film and game music. I think in some ways they overlap, and in some ways they're quite different. And in some ways, game music has potential to be more interesting because although you do often play in-game movies, cinematics, and you're actually scoring them as you would a movie or a television show, most of the music is in some ways closer to orchestral or concert music because you're not locked to picture, you're not actually catching anything, and therefore the musical potential is actually more significant. So I think as the games continue to get more interesting and we do a good job, I think that certainly game music is certainly its own unique genre, and certainly is as good as much of the film music that's out there right now. And particularly film music, I think at the moment, not that there's not some great scores coming out, but there's a lot of ambient scores right now. So I think game music in some ways has the opportunity to surpass it because game developers are really looking for these big scores. They're really looking for strong musical statements, whereas a lot of the films these days are not. So I'm not sure if that completely answers your question, but
That's a pretty good answer.
thoughts?
And Richard, what do you think?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I've been scoring games since '93, and the first sort of thing I noticed with regards to the technology allowing us to record live instruments, etc., I suppose it was when CD-ROM started becoming commonplace within computers, but also when the PlayStation 1 came out and games like Wipeout became available. That's when a lot of people sat up and took notice of I wouldn't say real music, but very different music to having MIDI or chip-based music that had been in the consoles before then. So people were playing Wipeout with their favourite bands and DJs contributing to the soundtrack. And I think ever since then, it started happening literally that year, when everyone was just sort of making music on CD-ROM like they would a record production, RM orchestras or singers or bands, and producing the music in the same way. I think with regards to sort of film and television, yeah, it is different. There are some crossovers, like Gary said, but I think in general, we are probably given a bit more freedom at the moment than film and TV guys get. And for me personally, the film world is, I think, losing sight a little bit of what I love about movie scores. Certainly with regards to sort of ambience and things like this, and just sort of musical sound design, which is great and it's appropriate and it's current and that's fine. But I think we are allowed to, write thematic music where it's appropriate and experiment a bit and sort of immerse the player in different ways than you would in a movie score. So yeah, I hope that answers the question to some degree.
Jesper?
I agree with everything that's been said. I don't know if there's a lot to add to that. A score for me that stood out was the Halo theme. I thought was a really creative kind of way to approach a sci-fi space, with game with like military undertones and stuff, and putting a Gregorian choir on that. And I thought that was really creative, and that's, I think maybe that was a stepping stone where people, maybe realized that you can do something really creative, and it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to always do what's expected. You can go out there and do something really different, and then it can have a big impact on the game. So that's a score that I would bring out. The Halo theme, I think, has done a lot of good things for the industry. People are more open to, creative and crazy ideas, I think.
Penka?
I'm a fairly recent convert from film into games, and I'm incredibly passionate about game music precisely because game scoring allows us, the composers, to create an environment, a world where the game lives. And this musical world is always very distinctive in themes, in sound, in style, and it really allows the composers to find that sonic identity, musical identity for the game. And I find this to be incredibly inspiring. And on this table, every composer has found an amazing sound that's really unique, really identifying for the game, and to me this is really inspiring.
I think that the music stands out in comparison to film, where games actually beat films. Music for games also could beat music for film, and this is in the interactivity. You just watch and sit and watch movies, and you just sit and listen to the score. But with games, you actually play it, and the music follows, and the music is being made in such a creative way that it's actually changing when you guys are making your own moves. And this is what is so unique about music for games, and this is why it's such a unique craft also, and it also brings it to this height of art form that it did not exist before.